This is Coffee with Kelly, a dynamic podcast that's dedicated to driving positive change in school safety. I'm your host, Ethan Woodman, Product Marketing Specialist for Crisis Go, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Kelly Moore, Senior School Safety Specialist for Crisis Go. Our mission is to empower you with essential knowledge, tools, and inspiration required to foster a safer and more secure school environment. We hope this podcast will be the catalyst for transformation in your schools. Join us as we continue to dive into the world of school safety. Good morning, Kelly.
Morning, Ethan. How are you today?
You know, I'm kind of disappointed.
Why?
Because you don't have your light set up like I do.
Well, I have natural light.
We were supposed to have them all matchy.
Yeah, I've never done matchy.
See, for all you people that are just listening to the podcast on Spotify or wherever, you could actually see our faces if you went and subscribed on YouTube.
Yeah.
But, that's if you were cool. We'll see.
And daring. Because if you do that, then you see our faces.
Yep.
The old guy and the guy.
And typically the YouTube channel will have a little bit more content.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah, I'm not as stringent with my editing as Kayla. So
gotcha.
I remove some of the ums and all that, but
yeah.
Like in our last episode, I left the whole part where I guess maybe it wasn't the last episode, but it was the episode with our partners CRG.
Uh-huh.
And I left the part where the cat ran in front of your screen.
Fantastic.
Because it was awesome. It was hilarious. So
yeah.
Well, you've given me the topic for the main section.
Uh-huh.
But I'm going to keep it the format here, and I am going to talk about not just one but two different in the news sections.
Okay.
Because they both happened recently. Sad to say. Usually we don't get this many things happening in this short a time frame, I don't think. But so the first one I want to talk about happened in Arlington, Texas. So any of you who are listening to this probably already heard about this by now. So this one's kind of an interesting one, and this is why I bring it up. So this particular school had one of those exterior they call them pods, classrooms. So it's like a modular little trailer looking building. So
yeah,
it's got like a really thin walls.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, portable.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guessing, from what I've been reading, that a 7-year-old was agitated enough to the point where he waited for another student to exit out of that portable and shot him.
So this was targeted to one specific person, right?
Yes. Yep.
And there was another person that was also hit on that, but I don't think that was the subject of the target, right? Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the intended target.
Yep.
Did pass away. So it's like, if that was a situation where it was someone that wanted to deal mass damage, I mean, he could have easily done that without even entering that portable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He could have just fired rounds from the outside. Because those portable, those walls are like hardly walls.
They're drywall type walls.
Yep. Yeah. That's like another thing you got to think about is if you're using these portable classrooms, like how do you secure something like that when you have where you can literally walk around the whole outside of it?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, it's not like a classroom inside a building where you've got one door.
Yeah. So you got two issues going on, right? Is first, how do you protect those buildings? Because those buildings were We called them portables when I was growing up. We had them all over California, and they were never meant to be permanent structures. They were meant to be a temporary gap between when the school was built and for them to get funds to build expansions because the population growing or what have you. So a lot of them were not meant to be thought of as most of them were not meant to be permanent structures, and they just left them because they never got the funding, they never pursued the funding, or they thought the population wouldn't stabilize at that point, or what have you. There was many reasons they were left there, obviously, but they were never meant to be part of the overall plan of the building, which includes oftentimes interior, exterior security doors. So they're not always directly protected. You can get to them from other means, is what I'm trying to say, and not necessarily going through the front door. Especially when you're talking about environments and climates that are generally open air type campuses because they're hot. They're, because of the culture of the area, like in Southern California, unless they're historical schools, most of those buildings were meant to open up into the world. They don't have closed corridors. They might have covered access, but they're not closed. You can access them. As one of my principals said, 40 acres of openness, of freedom. You can come and go in 100 different locations. And so part of that conversation is, how do you secure that? So that's a question that needs to be answered by that, is how did that gun get there? And how can we prevent that gun from ever coming back, right? Or getting that the second time. The second is based upon the same concept. These buildings were meant to be temporary structures, movable. And if they're movable, they're lightweight. Lightweight construction, they're generally, in comparison, although not necessarily the same, it's the difference between a permanent home and a mobile home, right?
Right.
And so the permanent homes obviously are much more robust. They have much better siding, much better protection. The codes are completely different. The building codes are completely different, and so forth. So these temporary structures are lightweight construction. They're essentially drywall and drywall. There's no stucco. There's no wood siding. There's no cement siding or what have you, right?
Right. Because a lot of these schools are made up of like cement, like walls.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
They're
Some
thick.
of them are stone.
Kind of
right?
like what you mentioned before, that they're kind of designed to be. Some of them are designed to be like shelters in during like a
earthquake, a hurricane, a tornado,
earthquake
right?
or something.
They're in the business, they call them essential buildings. So like police departments, government things that they need to withstand that kind of. So the structure, the building codes are much more robust for those types of buildings. Jails, as an example. So next question comes in: if you stand that and you're in a lockdown situation, how do you protect those that are inside? Right? Because you're right. You could just shoot through those walls. And, generally speaking, if you can secure that, you're better off, because people like to see what they're shooting at, whatever that is, whether it's a target, animal, whatever. They like to see it. And in fact, we train to do that. Right? And to the point that if you put a piece of paper in front of somebody, they will try to move around it to get a visual on their target. So you're better off doing that. It provides more protection than none, but that's certainly a question that needs to be answered, right? Because if you don't answer it as a safety director or somebody who's responsible for that, if you don't answer that question, somebody's going to ask it, and you're not going to like when and where. It's probably going to be in court, right?
All right. So the next in the news section that I want to talk to you about, and this is interesting because we've talked about something very similar. So let me pull it up. My screen's going to get a little bit brighter. I can't even pronounce what this is. Schenectady, New York. Wow, that's a really weird name.
Is it Schenectady?
Schenectady, is that how you say it?
I don't know.
Schenectady. Schenectady. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Learn something new every day, folks. Okay, so, and this is in New York. And this was, I think, somewhere around April 26th. So a few days ago. A 7th grade student basically was able to enter the school with a gun. So, and this school had all of those protective kind of stuff going on. So they got metal detectors, they had clear backpacks, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the interesting part, what you find out is they had people, at that front location,
mm-hmm.
but the people that were checking were teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Is that normal? So like as the kids are coming in, it's a teacher that's checking, and then once they're done, that same teacher just goes back to their classroom,
their teacherhood, right?
So I mean, well, here's the thing: like, if it's normal, like, that's all the more reason why teachers need to like actually try to implement all these school safety stuff and actually learn about it. Because it's like, if you're in that position, like, you're not teaching in that moment, you're going beyond your main job description. So if you're not investing a little bit in school safety, like, things like that are going to happen. You're going to miss.
A perfect world. We've talked about this quite a bit in different contexts. So first of all, it's usually not the equipment that fails. It's the person using it. It's the people, right?
Yep.
So I'll tell you, I'll give you another example of failures in the news at least 3 times this past week, last week and this week. There has been an American arrested in one of the Caribbean islands for possession of ammunition.
Oh, I did hear about one of those. Yeah.
Yep. There were at least two separate cases, but it was brought up on 3 different newscasts. And I listened to the same one listened to CBS. Here's the failure is these guys are facing a 12-year minimum mandatory sentence for possession of ammunition. Both of them were caught going out of the country, whatever country that was. Both of them admit that was their ammunition and it was in their luggage. They thought they had checked and they either missed it or did well enough to remove that luggage from some hunting trip that they had previously. So what does that mean to you, Ethan? What does that mean?
I mean, there's multiple points of failure there. I mean,
where's the most obvious one and the most concerning to me as a citizen?
Well, I mean, he left the country and didn't have a problem.
Which means what? TSA missed it. TSA missed him.
Yeah.
He didn't buy that ammunition down there. He took it through the airport, whatever airport that was. TSA missed it. These are people who are trained to see that stuff. Now, let's put it into context of today's question. These are people who haven't been necessarily trained. That's not their primary function, yet that's what they're charged with, right? So I've told you about my hockey game experiences, right?
Yes.
I didn't have anything, but when somebody said, "Hey, you set the alarm off," I say, "Oh, it's my belt buckle." I want them to search, but they don't. And that's happened to me several times. It's because they have these old retirees that are working like 5 hours during they're available for an event. They don't have any other job. This is what they're doing. They're working for an event and they get assigned to do the searching and going through the metal detector, right? But here's the rule. For every piece of preventative equipment that you need to have somebody who understands what the purpose of that equipment is, and they are trained in the use of that equipment and all that entails. So we talked about the school district that when they purchased metal detectors, they unplugged them after just a few short days. Why? Because it was detecting metal. It was doing its job, but it was detecting things that weren't weapons. They thought, in their minds, they're thinking, oh, this is going to prevent guns from coming in. Maybe that's what it's meant for. But it's
if you use it
detects
correctly.
metal. So it's detecting every spine in the metal spine and the binders, all of those spiral notebooks, phones. It's detecting all of these things that are metal that we carry with us every day. And they got tired of it. It was clogging up the lines. They weren't doing it correctly. So they just unplugged them and put them in the corner. Okay. Is that the fault of the metal detector? No. It's the fault of the people and the person who bought that piece of equipment, right? It's the same with cameras. People say, we don't even have cameras. We're being forced to buy maps and all of these other things, but we don't even have cameras. Cameras aren't preventative unless you put something in there that allows it to alert or that you are monitoring it, right?
Yeah.
And it's very expensive to have operational hours monitored. Why I say operational, generally speaking, when you have security cameras, it's 24/7. If you're going to monitor it properly, that's not necessarily a need when you have operational hours from 6 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, right? Because if you're monitoring, you want to have quick responses. So some people use that quick response monitoring. They use AI for that, which is, I think, a valid methodology. But it's very expensive to monitor. So if you say, I'm going to make you safer by putting cameras in there, I'm going to tell you, if that were the case, if that was a preventative measure, then we would have zero bank robberies right now. Yeah. We would have zero people cheating the casinos. We'd have zero if it was preventative. It's preventative. It's not even necessarily a deterrent, right?
Probably helps a little bit, but
it helps. But we give cameras way too much credit. I think we should have them. Yeah, absolutely. Don't get me wrong, because with the technology today, I can click on a link in my map that was created when I hit the alert. I can click on that link and monitor what's going on from that camera that sent the alert.
Pretty cool stuff.
That's cool stuff.
Yep. I mean, where do you get that kind of technology, Kelly?
Dude, call me.
Just call Kelly.
We have that capability at Crisis Go. We partner with people who provide that kind of service, and we're able to link cameras and do all that kind of stuff. It's intel. It's stuff that is almost real time, not actually real time, but almost real time. It's that kind of stuff that if you understand it, you can work through it. But don't tell me I need another piece of equipment before I get cameras, or I need cameras first. Cameras are something that it's good to have. Absolutely. but it's generally, unless you have all of the other capabilities, it's generally something that we look back to see what happened, not to prevent something from happening, especially with
Evidence.
Yep. But there's also a fair amount of people who can't afford cameras, so they're putting up fake cameras and they're telling everybody we have fake cameras. So, okay. But that kind of points to the body of this conversation is what are the experts telling us? Who are the experts? What does that mean when you're talking to a safety expert?
So what would define a school safety expert? Because you see a lot of them around, or self-proclaimed school safety expert.
Let's address what you just said first.
Okay.
What did you call them?
A school safety expert?
Self-proclaimed school safety expert.
Oh, yes.
Right? And this is why that's important, because there is no certification process. There is no, as we speak right now, there is nothing that prohibits somebody from saying, I'm a safety expert, and going into business for themselves and charging schools bunches of money. Right. And so this becomes somewhat of a sticking point for me. And I, in full disclosure, I am one of those people. I am a self-proclaimed school safety expert because I have no certification that says I've passed minimum qualifications, knowledge, skill courses, applied testing, where there's been practicals that I've been through. That being said, when you start talking about school safety, I can convince most people. Some people will probably say, you're stupid. I'm okay with that. But I can convince people that I have at least a mid to high level understanding of school safety. Okay. So in most arenas, the definition of an expert is somebody who knows a little bit more about the subject matter than the average person. So that's a pretty low bar to set. What we really should be looking at is how do we utilize a school safety expert? And I know the schools want to look at people and ask them questions as though that is the answer. And I think you and I have talked enough that the vast majority of the answers to the questions that are being asked, it depends.
Yep.
Right. So when somebody comes in and gives you a hard, fast, nope, this is the way it is, you're probably not talking to an expert. Or you're probably talking to the expert that doesn't understand the variables that are involved. They don't understand that school safety, emergency management, all of those things that are relevant in this discussion, they don't understand those relationships well enough. So I talked to a guy who's making a lot of money training people on active shooter response. And it took me about 10 minutes to say this guy's doing more harm than good, because his way was the right way, the only way. And when he was bashing another provider of similar training, and he says, he's teaching them to evacuate. You would never do that. Why would you ever do that? Well, there's lots of reasons you would do that. So,
Yeah.
and I did exactly what you just did. What?
Depends on the scenario.
There's lots of reasons you would do that. Yeah. So I finished my conversation with him and chose not to converse with him as an expert any longer. Probably a nice guy. He had law enforcement. Here's one of the problems that we have in my line of work, my current line of work, is people rely on their titles, the reputation of the agencies that they work for. We see this a lot in the federal agencies, as that gives them automatic credibility. And in a lot of cases, it does. But when we look at the individual, not the agency, but we look at the individual, we have to figure out for ourselves whether that particular individual is competent. Because we know not all police officers are created equal. They don't have the same experience, they don't have the same skill sets, they don't have the problem solving expertise, they don't understand these relationships that are required in management, but they rely on the fact that they are a former whatever. I say it all the time. If somebody doesn't know that I'm a retired commander from a sheriff's department in Southern California, they haven't listened to much of what I've talked about, or they've never, because I say it all the time, because it does give me a fair amount of credibility, but it doesn't make me a school safety expert. It's what I did there. And ask me, so what, and this is where we're getting to, is how do we vet our school safety experts? What makes you a school safety expert?
I mean, I think one of the biggest things has to be experience. If
Actual experience,
like what you're saying before, like if you were in this other agency that didn't really deal with schools, and now you're trying to apply your techniques and processes to a school environment, just because those most likely probably don't really go together very well. Like there's a lot of different things that need to happen.
Yeah, there are lots of federal and state agencies that exist for one specific reason. Right. And that's why you have different federal agencies, different state agencies. And there's lots of different agencies at all of those levels because they have this specialty. Now, can their specialty translate to school safety? Absolutely. But it doesn't always, right? So you have the Secret Service, you have ATF, you have a Border Patrol, you have the Federal Department of Corrections, you have uniformed versions of these. Almost every agency has a uniform. So we hear FBI, we think of the people wearing suits, responding to bank robberies, those types of things, large federal investigations, those types of things. They have a uniform division. They all work for the FBI, right? Secret Service has a uniform division. So when somebody says, I work for the FBI, that doesn't mean they have skills that are transferable to the school safety realm. A lot of them do, but that doesn't mean that they do. And you have to vet that out. What did you do for the FBI? What did you do for Border Patrol? What did you do?
Could be like an analyst for the FBI.
Absolutely. Right?
There's some applicable things there, but
right. But in some cases, an analyst might be better because they're looking at problems and taking and doing the research to analyze solutions or give intel and situational awareness and things like that. But that's what I'm saying is, and honestly, I am not bashing anybody. I'm just trying to say, this is one of those times where people look to people claiming to be school safety experts. And in some cases, they're creating obstacles for the whole safety industry to move forward. Right? Because they believe, or their experience in their situation tells them that this is wrong. But it's not necessarily wrong for everybody. It may be wrong for them, and it may be wrong under their circumstances, but that doesn't mean it's wrong for everybody. I think we've talked about this before. We've talked about one of the big obstacles for schools is the amount of conflict in information that the experts are telling them. Are we doing this? Or are we doing that? And they say we should run, hide, fight. This one says we should We should lock down. This one says this. What are we doing? Who's right? That's the question. And if somebody says, and this is almost a tell sign, when you start saying this piece of equipment is crap and this one works and this one, I would question their level of expertise. They might be right because there are manufacturers, there are vendors who provide bad solutions, right?
Sure.
But that doesn't apply to all vendors. And there's a big push in the school safety industry for panic buttons. A lot of states are saying panic buttons. What does a panic button mean? What does that mean? They haven't defined what it means. Most states have not. They just say you need a panic button because they think it's self-definable, and it's not. Is it a hard button, a hardwired button to a system that alerts law enforcement? Is that what it is? That can be it. Is it a wearable where they can press the button and it activates an alert and it goes to law enforcement? Is it a combination of both? Maybe a watch. Could it be on a watch where there's a button that's sitting there waiting and you just press that button and it goes?
The answer is yes.
The answer is yes. But there's all these different options. And you have to look at what's best for you. And for somebody to say that it has to be one of those and all the other ones are crap is not helpful. So if you advocate just for one or the other, you're always going to have a circumstance where that particular button is going to fail, as an example. If you advocate that the only panic button that you should be looking at is a hardwired panic button that is situated underneath a desk or whatever. Okay. So first of all, when you start talking about hardwiring anything, the costs go way up because that requires somebody to come out and physically do that. Right? So they have to create a network. They have to connect it to something. They have to physically mount a button, take those wires and connect it to that system. And that system then has to live somewhere and be activated. So it's more expensive. So who needs those buttons? How many of them do you need? Most states say every teacher has to have access to it. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that they run up to the front office and press the button? Does that mean that they have one in their room? And where is it in their room? And if it's mounted in their desk, underneath their desk, but they're a teacher that stands up and teaches and actively engages their students, how do they access it if they are in fact told this? Go to the opposite end of the room in a lockdown when you start hearing shooting. They're going away from it, right? And our good friends at Zero Eyes put out a stat, and I'm going to mess this stat up, but it's going to be close. Somewhere between 50 and 60% of all school shootings occur where?
Outside of the building.
Outside of the building.
I think you're pretty close.
So what you're doing by having a panic button, a mounted panic button, let's say at the front desk, which is the most common place, you're waiting for shots to be fired in order for somebody to realize that they need to press that button, right?
Yeah.
What happens if the incident is at the front desk and that's where your panic button is? What happens if your school shooting is at a sporting event? What are they using?
Yeah, exactly. It's like to hardwire a panic button way out into a stadium.
Yep. And who's going to know where it's at? Right? And if it's easily accessible, who's going to push that button when they don't want to take a test?
Yeah.
Right?
Kids are getting smarter and smarter every day.
I wonder what this red button's for.
Yeah, like you couldn't have that with like younger kids. They get into everything.
Kids do. Yeah, well, that's a button. Ha ha ha. Bink.
And they're gonna be like click, 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 click.
Right. So how do we teach our kids to read nowadays? Right. These little noise books that have little buttons you push that make our farm animal sounds. What does a dog sound like? Woof, woof, woof. Right.
I feel like I'm personally attacked here, but that's fine.
No, I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
All of our books are like that, Kelly.
I know.
All of our books are farm animal books.
Yep. Especially those of you that live on a farm. But what I'm saying is I'm not saying our system is the best. Actually, I think it is, but
I was gonna say,
honestly, I do, and I've said that forever. If I didn't think this was the best solution, I wouldn't work here.
But one of the reasons why I believe that you feel that way, and I feel that way too, is it's critical redundancy. It's you have
Yep.
all these different layers. It's not
Yep.
just we have one thing and we're promoting one thing. It's this. All it's a layered approach.
Right. I heard this stat the other day. 80% of all schools, their only way of communication during an emergency, intercoms and PA systems. 80% of schools. Do you know how old that technology is?
Older than me.
Yeah, 100. I mean, we're getting close to the 100th anniversary of the start of the Second World War, right? And they were using PA systems back then,
Yeah.
right? And so again, we get into sure there's technology where you can activate it from your phone, but oftentimes you can make announcements and stuff, and you have to override it, but you have to have an override code to do it. And and people get tired of hearing stuff on the PA system, and it has to be repeated over and over again, right? So redundancy, having the ability, if you're going to have a hardwired panic button, have a hardwired panic button. I'm okay with it. But have it such that it integrates with the alerts that are going out that tell somebody what you want them to do. Why, Ethan? There's two things people want to know. What is it?
I always get them mixed out of order, but
It doesn't matter the order.
What's happening and what do you want me to do?
That's right. Right. And a panic button generally doesn't even tell them what's happening. It just says, here you go. It's a, can you program some PA systems to run a tape? I suppose you could. I would think that technology is there. People want the receiver of that alert or that bell wants to know what's happening and what you want them to do. So can you do that with a panic button? Generally, no. Can you integrate panic buttons with systems that can do that? Yes. Use both. But you also want to give the ability of that PE coach that's sitting on the football field during PE and he sees some suspicious guy walking with a gun towards campus. You want him to be able to pull his phone out of his pocket and hit the button or what have you, right? You want everyone to, the bus driver, right? You want the guy mowing the grass. You want him to be able to see something and say something. You don't want him to have to call to the front office and say, hey, I think something's happening because I just saw that little problem child that we've been dealing with since the third grade walking with a death stare carrying a firearm.
Yeah.
Without the use of that kind of technology, we don't have that ability. We're buying into what the current culture is, and that's calling the front office and letting them decide what to do. We have adults, train them to see what it is and to do something about it. And I think we're doing our schools a disservice when we sit there and we go, nope, this is what you need. This is the technology that you need. I think we need to explain what that technology is and how to best use it and let them decide what it is that they need.
It's almost like you need someone for at least each district that's devoted to that district and understands what that district needs.
Yeah. You mean like a school safety director?
Yeah, one of those.
Yeah. Good segue.
I got you, Kelly.
You're right,
But
you do.
here, I want. I need to. I need to make the comment. I guess I've been holding in. I've been holding in, like, not dying laughing, but you've slowly been.
Yeah. Going back, I
You're,
but
you're,
I did fix the squeak
you're
in my
just
chair.
the head in the corner.
Yeah. All right. I'll get back up.
Yeah, thanks. We're trying to make this somewhat professional, Kelly. Come
We
on.
are. I know. I just get comfortable, and when I get comfortable, I sit back.
I'm just gonna use that as the thumbnail for the episode where your head's just in the corner.
Yeah. Trying to hide. I've been very fortunate, and I'm honored to have been selected to be part of a founding member of the National Council of School Safety Directors, and this is under the umbrella of an organization called Zero Now, whose mission is primarily to get rid of all violence in the schools, so that we can get rid of that for good. Right, is part of their mission. So the NCSSD, as we call it, was really formed for the purpose of giving voice to the school safety directors, defining that position, creating standards, certifications, and so forth, so we can help school districts really promote that permission or that position into a necessary part of their infrastructure and everything that they do. It's part of what we want to elevate that position into a professional position, not just a collateral. Right now, the vast majority of the schools, it's collateral duties. So you are an assistant superintendent and the designated safety person. You're an SRO and the designated safety coordinator, or whatever you call them, right? It's a common belief amongst the founding members of the NCSSD and others is that that position should actually be a position that is at an elevated level to where they answer directly to the superintendent, and that they're certified, they've passed testing, curriculum, they've taken classes, they've been trained in that, so they understand what it is they're actually tasked with, and that they are passionate about school safety as many of us are. And I've been very blessed in being able to work for a company that allows me to do this kind of stuff, right? And which is one of the reasons I took this job, was so I can continue advocating for school safety and working towards this sort of process. Of course, I want to take it a step further, but let's start with the school safety directors, because I do think, to your point earlier, I do think we need to minimally train all of our educational staff and anyone in the educational environment minimally to what their roles and what's expected of them during an emergency. I think we need to do that if they're going to be part of this solution. So that's the next phase. But I do think we're headed in the right direction. And if you're a safety director or designated with that responsibility, regardless of what your title is, I encourage you to be part of Zero Now and the National Council for School Safety Directors. It's $100 a year, and we're creating a community. We're going to create libraries. We're going to create certification. We're going to create trainings. We're going to create these things that essentially help the schools vet those people, even if they're going to continue with their same practice of assistant superintendent slash school safety director. That will allow them a place to go to get the information they need from a recognized source that has really worked collaboratively to find data driven best practices, those types of things that we talk about all of the time, and really look at helping people work through all of these problems. I don't want to say we're going to give them solutions. We're going to give them options, and we're going to help them work through that. And because the solution is going to be unique to them. And I think that's one of the issues we have. Every school that is, the first biggest hurdle we talk about all the time in our meetings is every school's different. Every school's different. Okay. Well, if that's going to be your position, then we can't create a standard. If every school is different. So let's create the standard and make every school similar, because I know we can do it, right? We have what's a position that we have in every school?
I mean, you've
every single school.
A principal.
Yet every single school, even the schools in the same district, are different.
Yeah.
But I know what a principal should be doing. Now, how they do it is going to be different. But I know what they should be doing. They're going to have their own solutions to those. Generally, superintendents, assistant superintendents, depending on the size of the school. Sometimes they're the same person. The principal and superintendent are the same. For like school districts that have one school, there's many of those around. And so if we can say that there is a minimum to be a principal, we can say that there's a standard for, and that's what I should have used. If there's a standard for being a principal, there should be the ability for us to create a standard so that when we're talking about a safety director, people know what that means. You can call it, you can add other ancillary collateral duties to that to account for your specific needs, but there should be a framework for that, and people should understand what that is. And I think that's where we're headed with that. My own opinion, but there's other people who believe that. Now we just have to figure out how we're going to get there.
Do you think you guys are going to have like any type of certifications? Like I feel like I'm pretty invested in this. Like I'm pretty passionate about school safety now that I've been here.
Mm-hmm.
Like I personally would be kind of interested. Like if you had a certification of like, I could say I have this level of certification and that shows that I've invested efforts and time into understanding school safety at these different levels and like be able to utilize that. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah. So exactly how that framework's going to look like at the end of the road is yet to be determined, but we're talking entry, intermediate, advanced. But we're also talking about the difference between a safety director and a safety coordinator, right? So, and we're talking about the difference between school districts that have their own police departments. So those things will be discussed as we get further down the road. And so there'll be like safety team. I'm envisioning, this is just ideas, but right now, because we're still in the very beginning stages of this, the formation, and this is the first real legitimate attempt to standardize that position. So we're going to need lots of input, lots of people, lots of members talking about what's going on and trying to vet that out and come to a consensus as to this is the way we should go and this is what we want it to look like. But there's so many different potentials. If you're talking about the one school district, versus the 160 school district, that safety director is night and day on the type of stuff that they're going to need to deal with and how they deal with it. Resources are going to be completely different. But if you can boil it down to what is the primary responsibility of that person, keeping the kids safe, training, certifying people, having safety teams, developing teams, those types of things, threat assessment teams, understanding mental health, not being a practitioner of it, but understanding how that impacts safety and how that impacts discipline and how discipline impacts safety and those types of things. That's a big issue. And, when you're dealing with schools that are districts that have 160 buildings, 200 buildings, that's a whole different conversation than the single building or the 5 building or the 10 building school districts. And in fact, it's probably much more diverse in the requirements at the smaller because you have the same person wearing multiple hats there. Whereas the large districts have a team of people that deal with each one of those. So how do you wrangle those in is the issue there. Whereas at the smaller districts, you're going to have to figure out how they become the practitioner of all that stuff. So, okay, those are the conversations. If you're interested, zeronow.org. I think I know there's a link on Zero Now to become a member of the NCSSD, but I think they have their own link, which is ncsSD.com. And if it's not com, it's .org. So yeah.
If I'm really good, I'll link it. I'll put it up there somewhere.
Yep. And now that we've said that, like, share, subscribe to the podcast, our blogs, so forth.
Heck yeah.
I'll end this by saying this. The proper school safety expert can make your life a lot easier and more efficient and more effective. You don't necessarily want a school safety expert who's trying to figure it out. They're going to make a lot of mistakes that are expensive, and they're not going to, in the long term, they're not going to be cost effective. They're going to slow things down. They're not going to be able to make the right decisions because they don't understand all of the variables, or that the fact there are variables. So it's incumbent upon those who are hiring and or assigning safety directors. It's incumbent upon them to make sure they get the right person in there. And what I'm talking about initially, superintendents have to become actively involved. They're hiring probably one of the most important positions that they can hire in a school. I heard this the other day, and I kicked myself for not making this connection. Schools have directors for everything: athletic directors, instructional directors, directors of special ed, directors of cafeteria, food services, director of maintenance, director of finance. They have directors for everything. All of these people have the ear of the superintendent, except one: school safety directors. There are only a little bit more than a handful of states that even require it. And we're 25 years past Columbine.
That's crazy.
And people are still trying that if they, and I will give kudos to my boss. I'll give a shout out to her, Fran Wagner. She got promoted and assigned safety duties as an assistant superintendent for the district that I worked with. She was smart enough to understand that she didn't have the skills and experience and expertise to do that. And she had so many other duties that she was responsible for. She didn't have the time to figure it all out. And that's how I got my job. But I mean, she created that job to have somebody come in and fill it. Somebody who had the expertise, somebody who was capable of addressing their issues and making them safer. And that's what all of these other school districts should be doing. Don't wait for a mandate.
Yeah,
I think it's appalling that we don't have a mandate because schools tend to wait for mandates. It should be a requirement, but we shouldn't need a requirement. People should understand that they are over their heads. As soon as we look at one of our biggest obstacles we have in school safety, I'm not an expert. I don't know what to do here. I get confused because all of these experts say different things. Okay, then hire somebody who can do that for you. And that person in this case is a school safety director. This is not rocket science. This is simple. I can't do it. I have to do it. So maybe I should hire somebody who can do it. Figure that out. Make sure you get the right person.
Makes sense to me.
If you need help with that, call Kelly. I'll help you.
Just call Kelly.
Just call Kelly. He's free. It doesn't cost any money.
He's being totally serious too.
Call. I talk to people all the time.
If you want Kelly's number, just comment and say, "I want Kelly's number." We'll give it to you.
It's probably on the website somewhere.
It's not. I looked. No, I'm kidding. You go on crisisgo.com and into the little chat thing and say, "I'm looking for Kelly Moore's number. I want to talk to him about school safety."
I'd be happy to talk to any. I'll talk through it. I'm not going to give you the answers because the answers are dependent on your situation. But I'll talk you through it. I can tell you what I would do given the circumstances that you give me. I'll tell you what I would do. All right. Very good. I think we're done.
See you later.
See you later.
And with that, make sure you like and subscribe and share. Share it to all your family and friends and everyone else, even people that you're not friends with, so we can continue this endeavor of protecting people. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, leave a comment on our website at crisisgo.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with Kelly, a discussion on school safety.